Last year at the Southern 500, Clint Bowyer honored NASCAR legend Ned Jarrett with his 2018 Carolina Ford Dealers Darlington Throwback Ford Fusion. Howdy folks, it's Diecastbuffet here again, and welcome back to another NASCAR Diecast review. Today's car is a 2018 Darlington Ford Fusion, and is Clint Bowyer's throwback. Wow. This car right here, let me tell you. It does not have a gloss finish, and surprisingly, it actually has kind of a matte / satin finish. And I gotta admit, man, this is a cool throwback. Wow. I mean, just vintage. And I cannot wait to get this car open. Let's go ahead and hop to it. Here she is, folks, brand new out of the package, and wow. As I mentioned already, this car does not have a gloss finish to it. It's a kind of a satin finish to it, and I gotta admit, it looks really good on this Ford. So, the throwback, for those who don't know, this is a throwback to Ned Jarrett's 1965 Southern 500 winning paint scheme. Now, it's not identical, but it's very similar to it, and that was a record-breaking NASCAR race. And that record from that race happens to be Ned Jarrett leading the field by 14 laps. 14 laps. Crazy. Crazy indeed. And guess what? Number 14 on Clint Bowyer's car. I mean, it's just perfect. He won the 65 Southern 500, and he dominated. Just dominated the entire field. And how fitting is it for Clint Bowyer to do that and to have the number 14 on the car. This is a car from Wave 1, so I mean, it's not, the newest thing out there, but this is a car I really wanted and I couldn't find in Wave 1. I couldn't. When I picked up some of my other Wave 1 cars, they didn't have the Clint Bowyer one there, and I was kind of disappointed because Bowyer is one of my guys. He's one of my favorite drivers and, in my opinion, the best personality in the NASCAR garage. And I gotta admit, man, this is a really cool throwback. They didn't try to cheese this one. They didn't just put Haas on the hood, or they didn't put, they didn't put Rush Truck Centers or something like that. No, they made this car look really cool. They put Carolina Ford Dealers. I think that's a very nice touch, because it reminds me of the early days of NASCAR, because they used to have a lot of dealership sponsors. There wasn't a whole lot of sponsors back then. The sport wasn't the cash cow it is now. So, car dealerships had money to sponsor the cars. There was such a huge connection between the dealerships and the actual on-track cars that it just made sense. And a very cool touch right there that the hood actually says Tony Stewart owner. That is really freaking cool, man. That is really cool. So Tony Stewart owner, 358 cubic inches. I mean, just that vintage, kind of bold, kind of, I would say crooked in a way, kind of font. Just so cool, man. So cool. Vintage contingencies. I mean, you want to talk about a really cool diecast, man. This is a cool diecast, and honestly, I could see this car being worth a decent amount years from now, because this car, I believe, was canceled in the 164 Gold Series, and the Authentics line saved it. But I gotta admit, man, this is a really cool paint scheme. I mean, if you like vintage NASCAR racing, you are a fan of the old days, I mean, this is a paint scheme you want to get. It pays huge tribute to those who, I mean, in my opinion, were just daredevils out there on the racetrack. The kind of cars they were racing at the speeds they were, and the lack of safety, I mean, it's a wonder they didn't have more deaths. And I think paint schemes like this pay tribute to those who lost their life in the early days of racing and truly shaped the form of safety that we see in modern motorsports. And one of the really cool things about racing is that when one of these racing sports series, whether it's F1 or rally car racing, IndyCar racing, NASCAR racing, whatever it might be, when one of them finds a breakthrough in safety technology, from the Hans device to the safer barrier and to crush panels and all kinds of stuff like that, that information is shared across the globe. And that's what's really cool about racing. But unfortunately, you have to have casualties for that, and that's a shame. But that's life, you know. It happens, unfortunately. But I gotta admit, man, this is a really cool die cast, and I mean, my goodness, man, just look at it. You know, it's not glossy. It's a satin finish. It's beautiful looking, man. Carolina Ford dealers. I mean, just my goodness, man, what a good looking die cast. So you got Kannapolis, North Carolina over here on underneath the Carolina Ford dealers logo. You got Mobile One, One Cure, Haas, Rush Truck Centers, Mobile One. Looks like you got Exalta down there. Then you got, of course, CLINT BOWYER 14. Then you got your contingencies, which is Mechanics Worth, 3M, Lincoln Welders, Flowmaster, and NASCAR Darlington. I would say they're bad, so to speak, because it goes where the NASCAR race car logo would be, and it's pretty much just the vintage NASCAR logo, the series, Cup Series one. Goodyear, pretty cool 14 there. I like how the fonts for the 14 are different around the car. So you have like a really bold, not bold, but a really skinny kind of plain Jane one. Then you have one that kind of has like a nice 3D effect. Then you just have a plain Jane 14 over here on the roof. I like that. I really do. I like seeing different ones because that's how it was back then, you know? They had different fonts, and it wasn't, you know, just one set thing like we see nowadays, because the numbers nowadays are so marketable that they're, you know, actual, you know, they're actual brand identity, so to speak. You know, these race teams, they pay good money to have these you know, numbers sometimes trademarked, and they're considered, you know, a sponsor essentially. Like, you can't put them on merchandise without the, you know, without the team's approval essentially. The color for it is not the best because it is kind of a darker on the camera, but I would say it's slightly darker than the car itself. You might be able to kind of see that it's slightly darker than the car itself, but that's okay. You know, different materials, they hold and represent colors differently, but that's okay. I really do like this, man. I love the vintage fonts, the styling. I mean, this is amazing. And you got the hood here, and wow, it is beautiful. It is a beautiful hood. Retro, so retro, man. Carolina Ford dealers, Kannapolis, North Carolina. You got your signature SHR 14, 358 cubic inches, Ford Motor Company. There's a little bit of a mess up down here on the little trim line. There's a little bit of a mess up, not much. See, there's a little bit of a mess up there, not much, but overall, man, let me tell you, this is a beautiful die cast, and if you have not picked this one up, I highly recommend it. I mean, this is a car that I think some people are going to wish they had years from now. I mean, I could definitely imagine this thing being a collectible piece years from now that people actually want to have, because with it only being the Authentics line, I do think this car will dry up. So make sure to get it if you do see it. Make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to Diecastbuffet for more NASCAR diecast content, NASCAR gameplay, all that good stuff. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're having a great one out there. And Diecastbuffet, signing off.